Hey friends, happy spring. I've been so ready for this seasonal transition for quite some time. Many a weeks I've been feeling it deep in my soul. It is time to move on from winter. There are several things that brought me joy this past season that made this winter bearable, and I'm really hyped to share them with you today. Let's chat books. There are a handful of books that I will be taking with me as I move on with my life as favorites that I read this past winter. And it's really interesting as I transition from winter to spring. My reading has definitely slowed down early in this year, and I'm not mad about it. I'm not calling it a reading slump because personally for me, I feel like that terminology kind of has a premise, like this expectation that like I will always want to do reading and that like it's bad if I'm not in the mood for it. Right now, my reading has really slowed down. We are getting towards the middle of March. I've only really finished one book. I've started several. I've been really empowering myself to not finish books, just push them to the side, even if I'm 60% the way through, but I'm not loving it. So that's been the state of reading for me, and it just is what it is. Like I'm not really reading the same amounts that I was this time last year, and that was like 12 books, 15 books, 8 books. I'm only, clocking in one book so far in the middle of March, and that's totally fine because other parts of my hobby life, other parts of adulting have been thriving or they just need a little bit more attention right now, and that's okay. It's funny looking back at some of these books because I read some of these in December and that feels like a million years ago, like Sally's Lament. This was The Nightmare Before Christmas retelling, spin-off, sequel, book that I've been waiting for quite some time. It was so well written, so empowering, so fun to be able to jump into this world and see what this author made of it. Sally's Lament is a twisted tale. It is a Disney approved retelling of The Nightmare Before Christmas if Sally had actually found all of the little holiday doors. I may or may not have teared up towards the end of this book, and I think it is great around winter, around fall. Honestly, any time of year, I think this would be a great read. So Sally's Lament was the big standout for me for December, and January was all about the Ice Planet Barbarian series. Eventually, I picked it up when I entered my monster romance era, and I was ready. My arms were open, and I'm not kidding you. Literally, all I listened to in January was Ice Planet Barbarians. I was obsessed, still am. Eventually, I'll get to it. Maybe this winter, but I really do feel like it helped me just like push through the darkest, deepest parts of winter this year. February was all about the spooky Valentine's Day vibes, and I found a series that I'm just so obsessed with, and that is the Charming series. The first book is called Charming Your Dad, and there's like 2 other books that have been released so far. There's a 4th on the way. I will be definitely reading that one as soon as I can get my hands on it. If you're a fan of the series Lucifer, you should definitely pick up this book. It was totally giving that TV show. It's about, demons in hell and there's drama amongst them. You also have like the quote unquote good guys in heaven, these angels that like have political issues with the demons in hell, and it sounds like it's very fantastical. I guess it kind of could be. I'm not a big fantasy gal. I'm more like on the cozy fantasy side, and I feel like this went like just far enough where it was still staying in the lane of like paranormal romance, but it did have some like fantastical elements with like a witch and some of the more like world building aspects that I didn't feel like overtook the story. Like it's not that lengthy. It gave me just enough to feel that the world, the characters were believable without like going overboard and making it feel tedious for me as somebody who's not like really into high fantasy at the moment. Later in the month of February, I did read a new release, Hungerstone, and I really enjoyed it. I was highly anticipating this one because it is a Carmilla retelling. It is a beautiful book. I will find myself rereading this one in the future. A lot of really beautiful musings about women at that time that I just think are so, most unfortunately, very sadly, relatable and transferable to our present moment. Just the feelings of repression and people pleasing and, just this gendered understanding of like who we're supposed to be to others, to the outside world that we've been learning and internalizing since we were little girls. My only complaint about this one is that there wasn't enough like vampire moments, but I think definitely after reading the author's note, there was a really good reason why that wasn't a part of the story. It really kind of develops in a way that Carmilla ends up being this like stand-in for personal development for our main character. So don't go in expecting a lot of vampire vibes with this one. It's very much using the vampire archetype in a way that I think does a lot more work than just gore and horror. There's something there that's going on to teach us something about how this character is growing and evolving. On a little bit of like a lighter note tone-wise, I had so much fun with My Lady's Choosing, which is an interactive romance, choose your own adventure novel that I am so obsessed with. I feel like you could read this book a million times and have different outcomes. I thought it was written so well. I thought it was so fun. Like, it's clear that the authors are really interested in, you know, classic romance novels. They know the tropes, they know the archetypes, and they really included them in a very humorously written way. It was really great because sometimes in February, I was just like feeling like my brain was not functioning at a level where I could read anything super dense. And sometimes starting a book is intimidating when I'm not, not well enough, like I'm not like awake enough and my brain isn't ready to read. Like, it feels very stressful for me to start a book, even if it's just to read one chapter. But with this interactive, like, choose your own adventure novel, I didn't have to get too invested. Like, I could just read a page here, 2 pages there. A little chapter is just like 2 to 3 pages, sometimes just 1. So it really helped me get through February and feel like I was immersing myself in a fun little world that had very little stakes, but a lot of giggles along the way. So I highly recommend this one if you're a fan of anything that has to do with like the romance genre. You want something light, well written. There's sapphic representation in here as well. So it's a fun little romp, and I enjoyed every minute of it. So I got to, at the start of January, some of the 2024 releases that I hadn't gotten to yet, like Your Monster. This is the best. Like, if you're a monster romance girly, you have to get to this one. I don't know if it's streaming anywhere. I think it actually might be. I actually paid to watch it on Apple TV, and I didn't regret it for a minute. It is kind of rough when it comes to like rewatchability, because I found that the whole process of her dealing with her breakup, which is a big part of her development as a character, and how she was so attached to this awful man, like, it was hard to watch. But then the end was just so amazing. Recently, I was talking to a friend of mine about this movie, and she totally blew my mind with the ways that she was viewing these characters and how they like relate to each other. And I won't spoil anything if you want my theory about the ending of this movie and just like the relationship between the monster in her closet and our main character, played by Melissa Barrera. Like, let me know down below in the comments and we'll have a spoiler-filled chat about it. I have my theories based off of what my friend said, and I'm just like, wow, it blew my mind, made me love this movie even more. So a perfect movie to watch in February. Just get ready for the ending. It's great, it's epic, it's everything I wanted. Another movie with an amazing ending is The Substance. I watched this, I think, in January, and I was kicking myself at not watching it sooner. I don't know what it was. I think what took me so long to watch this movie is that it had a lot of body horror. People were talking about that, and I enjoy reading, or I have the capacity to read body horror and violence in books more than I enjoy watching it, because movies make it way too visceral with the visuals that are on the screen, and my body just like doesn't have the bandwidth for enjoying that when it's on a TV screen. So I took some time with this, and then it eventually felt right, and I was so happy. Like, this movie is amazing. It's so gorgeously created. It's so rich. Like, I had so much to say about my experience personally. I love it. I think it's gonna be a classic. I think Demi was robbed at the Oscars. I don't expect much from the Academy, but like, that was devastating because she so deserved it. During February, I really wanted to get those spooky Valentine's Day vibes in, and I wasn't just reading romance books, but I was also watching some really silly monster romance movies, and I found one that I am so in love with, and it's like totally campy, totally silly, but I stand by it, and that is Tammy and the T-Rex. You can't tell me that this movie is not a good time. Okay, so basically, if you've never heard of this movie, it stars Denise Richards as our main character. She has this guy that she's kind of, I don't know, she's kind of seeing, but there's some beef with her ex-boyfriend and him. It's just, I don't know, high school drama, high school nonsense. And the guy that she's interested in, that she's kind of starting this new relationship with, is Paul Walker. And he's so adorable as this really young kid, probably at the beginning of his acting career. And yeah, he becomes a dinosaur. Don't ask me why. You'll have to watch and find out. but I found this movie to be so cute, so adorable. It's super campy, it's so silly. I feel like the actors were all in on the joke. So tonally, I thought it was even throughout, and I had a good old time. I could see myself rewatching this one. The only movie I've seen in theaters this year has been Hard Eyes, which is kind of wild because usually I will go to movies. I enjoy the theater experience, but nothing has drawn me to go, which is really sad. I gave my full review of Hard Eyes in my spooky Valentine's Day vlog where I had a whole self-care day, and that meant taking myself to the earliest morning showing of Hard Eyes so I could be as alone as possible as I watched it, and I just loved it. I found that it was the perfect balance of humor and, picking out the little romance tropes, adding in the horror stuff. I love the pairing of these two leads. I thought that was really great. Thought they had awesome chemistry. I found that visually the movie was so gorgeous. There were suspenseful moments, but because of the tone was more humorous and they're poking fun at a lot of typical romance tropes, I, as somebody that doesn't do well in high suspense movies, I was able to hang in there. We really don't have enough holiday horror for the Valentine's Day time of year, so I'm really, really happy that this one worked for me, and I'm for sure gonna be adding it to my movie rotation year after year. Something new for me this winter was getting into watching series, which has never really been my thing. I don't know what was going on. Maybe I just really wanted to dive deeply into a world, immerse myself in it, and that's something that really makes shows different than movies. The first series that really got me going here was Shining Vale. This show was so good, and what a bummer for it to end so quickly without fully wrapping itself up. I think Courtney Cox gets a lot of flack for maybe not being a good actress, being very one note. I don't care. I think she's so likable. I thought she was really meant to play this role. The way in which I felt so immersed in this family, I'm I'm a Phelps too, right? I think I also really enjoyed it because it kind of reminded me of the first season of American Horror Story, where it's set in the Burner house, and this house does have quite the story to tell. And also because it does go back in time, and that's a big part of the backstory, the lore of this home. And that's a lot of what happened in American Horror Story. So I think that's what made me enjoy it so much. I love when a house becomes a character. Add this series to the long list of shows that were canceled way too soon. After I finished Shining Vale, I was on the hunt. What would be my next spooky show to watch at the end of my workday when my brain is turned to mush and I have nothing in me, no energy to read a book? And then my life changed. I watched for the very first time What We Do in the Shadows, and once again, asking myself, how did it take me so long to watch this show? There was the Lauren before she watched What We Do in the Shadows, and then there's the Lauren after. I'm all the better for it, and I just think it's so ridiculous that I thought for the longest time that this show was all about a group of people who play acted, who pretended or LARPed being vampires. I didn't realize this show is literally if Parks and Rec included real vampires. This show is probably the reason why I will keep Hulu longer than I want to into the future, and it's really strange. When I looked online to try to find box sets of this show, nothing is there. It's stuff that people have kind of, recorded and put together, nothing officially licensed. Fingers crossed that sometime soon after the show is wrapped up, they'll start releasing some official box sets. Winter brought a lot of cozy gaming for me, and it makes sense because winter is usually the least social time of the year for me. It's colder outside, I wanna be home, I wanna feel safe in my cozy little cocoon, and video games typically require less brain power than reading a book for me. In December, my world was rocked by Roki, and it's such a simple game, but it's so sweet. Inspired by Scandinavian folklore, the game takes players into a snow-covered wilderness filled with monsters and hidden legends. Players take on the role of Tove, a young girl who must explore and solve puzzles to save her family from an unknown fate. Even months later, I think about this game constantly, and I just feel like it left a lasting impression on me. Another favorite game of mine that I played this past winter is Dredge. There's a lot I wish I would have known ahead of time before I started this game. I think it would have made the experience all the more enjoyable. So look out for videos like that kind of give advice without giving away any spoilers prior to starting the game. Dredge is a single-player fishing adventure with a sinister undercurrent. Sell your catch, upgrade your boat, and dredge the depths for long-buried secrets. Explore a mysterious archipelago and discover why some things are best left forgotten. There's something weird going on. It's very cosmic. but still cozy at the same time. I just had a blast with this one, and I think it's just so much fun to unearth all of the stories in these individual islands that have different themes as they're completing quests and trying to get down to the bottom of what is going on in this weird place. And despite being a bit glitchy, Cabernet is another favorite of mine from this past winter. I did talk about this game and my first impressions of it in a video, which I can link down below in the description. And I did recently finish it, which I was kind of surprised. The ending felt a bit abrupt. Cabernet is a 2D narrative RPG set in a 19th century Eastern European inspired world with a modern twist. Guide Liza, a young vampire in her new unlife among the unsuspecting townsfolk. Will you retain your humanity or descend further into the horror you've become? I still stand by everything I said in my first impressions video, but then as I started to play the game a little bit more, put in a few more hours, I started to get very invested. I started really wanting to just like play this game in my free time, and that's a big sign that I'm immersed in the world, I'm having fun. I also mentioned in my first impressions video that there were glitches that I experienced, and they did continue. Not often, but there were moments where like I couldn't leave a room, and that was very annoying. And besides the glitches, I really didn't enjoy how it felt like there was like a time pressure, there was like deadlines to complete things. And because I enjoyed this game so much, I wanted to do all the quests, all the things. And I felt like there was a timestamp on when I could do all the like minor stories and all the little smaller adventures. I just didn't like how the main story was prioritized, which meant I didn't get to do everything, and I'm such a completionist. So I know I have like my gripes, but still, it was a favorite. With winter comes chilly weather, and also my love of tea increases tenfold. My tea of choice this past winter has been the Till Death blend, and the company is Petals and Poison. I'm not too sure if they still sell this specific blend, but they have tons on their website. I love their branding. It's gothic, it's spooky, it's whimsical. And they even actually have an in-person like brick and mortar tea shop that one of these days I will go. It's in Southern California, and it just sounds incredible when they post anything on Instagram about it. I enjoy adding a cream to this, and just, it's so good. This specific one right here is a romantic blend of black tea, white chocolate buttercream flavoring, dried raspberries, and topped with silver pearl sprinkles. This brew is inspired by antique wedding cakes. And when I wanted something a little bit boozy, this winter my go-to cocktail has been the Last Word. I've been super obsessed with Genepi, which is basically the same thing as green chartreuse. This is a very old cocktail. I think it was crafted during the Prohibition era in the 1920s. It is 1 part gin, 1 part green chartreuse. I sub in Genepi. There's also 1 part lime juice and 1 part maraschino liqueur. It's just so easy. You just like put everything in a shaker and then you pour it all into a glass. Like that's the kind of witchery I do. I'm like so lazy. Personally, I love how old school YouTube these favorites videos are. Plus, I don't always have the time or the interest in creating dedicated videos for all of the like top highlights of my hobby life. So being able to talk about them all in one go is really fun. It's a great way for both of us to check in on what we've been up to. So in any of the categories I chatted about here or other things, I'd love to know what has been bringing you so much joy this past winter. What are you looking forward to in the spring? For me, it's going to be a whole lot of wedding planning, just like staying present in that process, regulating my nervous system, and just trying to enjoy the moment, knowing that it won't last forever. I'm wishing you all the good things. I'll see you on my next video. Bye!